Hey, it's Don again. This is just something that I believe the Lord has impressed upon me to share, as it were. So let's just see how this goes. The Bible, of course, says in Deuteronomy chapter 5, starting verse 8, "Thou shalt not make thee any graven image." Okay, you got a warning against idolatry. Religions that are associated with idolatry, images, idols, or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the waters beneath the earth. Thou shalt not bow thyself unto them. By the way, not even as an aid to worship, nor serve them, for I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon. Now this thing is passed on like a hereditary disease. You talk about something affecting your DNA and your genetics and I don't know what. This thing says, upon the children unto the third and fourth generation of them that hate me. And I've known a lot of Catholics. We had Catholics in the family, and you wouldn't think they hated God. And they would, if you said, "Do you hate God?" Oh heavens, no. Oh, I can't even believe you said that. What? But when you really examine, you show them a King James Bible, they want nothing to do with it. You try and give them sound doctrine, they want nothing to do with it. You try and talk to them about the real God, the real Jesus Christ, they want nothing to do with them. They're interested in their religion, which is an idol. They're interested in their idols themselves and their beliefs and their beads and all of their physical things, their priesthood and whatever. That's what they love. And they can call that God if they want, but they really don't love the real God and the real Bible. They hate the real God, and they hate the real Bible, and they hate the real gospel, according to how they react to them. So you can see that you've got to the third and fourth generation this curse. You might have a great-great-great-grandfather, great-great-great-grandmother that was into idolatry, into Roman Catholicism, Mormonism, whatever, and it affects the children, it affects the grandchildren. You might ask yourself, well, why is it that the country, whatever country you're living in, USA, whatever, it keeps getting worse and worse, and they continually become more godless, and they continually have more problems with just simple spiritual things. I think this is the answer here. I think you have generation after generation that's just been so corrupted, and they're under this curse that they can't get out from underneath it. And even after they've gotten saved, it's like they still have a dimmer switch on them because of what their fathers did. Now maybe you can pray. If you got saved, maybe you can pray and ask God to lift any of that generational curse off of you. All right, I would. Well, I don't think it's there once you get saved. Okay, I'm not going to argue with you. You may be right. I'm not going to argue with you about that. But myself, if I knew that my parents, my grandparents, great-grandparents were Roman Catholics and all that sort of thing, I'd be praying and pleading the blood and saying, hey, I want to be washed from, if there's some kind of generational curse that I'm still having to feel the effects of, even though I'm saved. I want that off of me. I line up with the King James Bible. I line up with Jesus Christ. I want that off of me, Lord. Okay, that's what I would do if I was you. And you look back in your history, and there's some of that. Might just flip a spiritual relay switch in your heart and mind. You don't know. It may just open things up for you that weren't there before. There's a lot of stuff that goes on that's in the spiritual realm that you can't really explain physically. Like they got the Hadron Collider, and they're trying to explain, the God particle and all this stuff going on by physical means. And you can't do that. There's spiritual science, if you will, involved in the physical realm. And that spiritual science affects the physical realm. Like, the breath of life, that has to do with something that's spiritual, that you try and explain through, well, there's oxygen in the blood, and that's in the womb. It ain't physical, man. You gotta start thinking about the spiritual realm. God works in a spiritual realm, and that is integrated into the physical realm, and the physical realm functions according to the spiritual underpinnings, the spiritual foundation of that physical thing. All things are held together by the word of his power. Okay, the very atoms are held together by a spiritual force, which they will never find at the Hadron Collider. Now, I said all this. Yeah, where are you going? I'm a Nesbit. I come from this is a Scottish clan Nesbit, and I wanted to just share a little bit of this. This is Nesbit comes from Old Barony of Nesbit in the parish of Edrom, Berwickshire. Now, if some of you are in Scotland or near it, maybe you know where that is. In the second half of the 12th century, William de Nesbit was witness to a confirmation of a character of the priority of Coldenham granted by Patrick. Now, this is not really what I want to get into here, but just shows you, this is kind of, this is where my family, my fathers come from. Just like a Jew can trace his lineage back through his fathers so far. And that's something you should do to find out what you are. We have this teaching today from the world that we're all the same. No two people are different. We're all equal. All this kind of stuff. That's not true. And once I realized what I was, W-H-A-T, when I realized what I was, and that's primarily based on your fathers, then things started to make sense. And here's way back. One of the best known of the name was James Nesbit. Now, my father is James Nesbit. So this name has come down through the centuries. Translator of the New Testament into the Scots tongue. Now, they call it James. I think some call it John Nesbit. Here they're saying it's James Nesbit. Maybe those names are somehow interchangeable in Scots, I don't know. But notice that the New Testament in Scots, that is the New Testament that wasn't based on a Catholic text, but was in a Scottish text, or in a King James text, if you will, in the Protestant text, that came from my fathers, the Nesbits. Now, do you think the Lord's going to bless that? See, this is where I'm going. What you do is going to affect your children spiritually. It's going to affect your grandchildren if the Lord tarries. Okay, let me read some of this. This is just research I did. Scottish-English border region. This is where the Nesbits are at. Lived among the clans of the Boernician tribe. Andon D. Nesbit, the founder of the line of the Nesbits in 1139. So this gives me some information about what I am and where I come from. First in Berkshire, then also Roxburghshire, Northumberland, Durham, and again, you Scots, you know where that is. Murdoch Nisbet, different spellings, but it's the same family. Just they would break off and they would start, I don't know if they were having spats or what, and they would have different spellings. Who was converted under John Wycliffe. Now look at this association. This is what I'm talking about. You know who John Wycliffe was? The barefoot preacher, the 14th century. One of my fathers, Murdoch Nesbit, was converted under John Wycliffe, the barefoot preacher. Murdoch acquired one of the rare English language manuscripts of the Bible. Murdoch used Wycliffe's version, that's a Protestant King James-like version, to translate a New Testament into Scots in 1520. That's a pretty good ancestry. And I guess my point is, if there's a curse on the one side, don't you know there's a blessing on the other? I mean, how is it that from the ripe old age of like 5 years of age, the Lord started tapping me on the shoulder and put me under the first real crisis? And it was a crisis. Oh, come on, Don, 5 or 6 years of age and you had a crisis? Yes. I was scared of hell. And look, there was nobody in the family doing this. That I was going to a very, very liberal Methodist church that did not mention hell. And all of a sudden, the Lord started just beating me about, you need to get saved. Wanting me to get saved, needing me to get saved at a very young age. And then that was pretty much the status quo after that, making sure I got a King James Bible and all the rest of it. Why? Well, don't you know that just as there's a curse in Deuteronomy for those who are whose fathers messed with idolatry, don't you imagine there's a blessing? Those of you who are sticking by the Lord, sticking by the King James Bible, you're doing the right thing, you're saved, you're more of a blessing to your children and your grandchildren than you know. You're giving them, you may not be able to give them money, you may not be able to give them much as far as what the world is seeing, but you have given them something that the eye cannot see, but will manifest. Let's see here, 1520. No attempt had been made to provide the Scottish people with the scriptures in their own language and in the correct Protestant text before Murdoch Nisbet. From the memoir of Sergeant Nisbet, first published 1718 in the reign of King James IV, sometime before the year 1500, it pleased the eternal Jehovah to cause his marvelous light to take influence on Murdoch Nisbet in Hardhill in the parish of Loudon and Shire of Ayr, however you say that. His eyes were open to see the vanity of evil of popery. Okay, Nisbets were anti-popery. So he deliberately resolved against it. Man, you talk about Protestant protest. And this is where I understood what I was like and what I was. I see myself in these guys. Turned from it and joined himself with these called lollards. Dude, the Nisbets ended up not only coming out with the King James Bible, essentially, and the New Testament Scots, they joined the lollards. The first name given to British Protestants, whom papists called heretics. That's us, baby. Later in his old age, helped others who in many places in the land demolished idolatry. In his line of grandchildren, they kept his New Testament translation safe and guarded. 1650, his grandchild, John Nisbet, here's where John comes in, took up arms. These are aggressive folks, man. These are militant Christians. They don't take any, garbage. Took up arms for the covenant against the Pope. These are covenanters, man. In 1666, John marched with a group of covenanters, which was attacked on Rullian Green. Outnumbered 4-1, hoorah! And short on weapons, the Covenanters fought valiantly but suffered defeat, wounded in 17 places. John was left for dead. He recovered and wandered as a fugitive for years. John was then attacked. I know what that's like. Not like this guy, though. John was attacked by a party of dragoons. That's mounted infantry, led by one of his cousins. Oh boy, do we know what this is about. In the family. You take a stand for Jesus Christ, you take a stand for what's right. It's going to be your own cousins, man. that are going to be fighting against you. Oh boy. He fought and was wounded 7 times. He was tried at Edinburgh and condemned to death. Despite his serious wounds, he rejoiced in God, claiming he'd had a vision of God. December 4th, 1685, the soldiers led him to his execution. Witnesses said his face shone in anticipation of glory. Yeah, no doubt, baby. He exclaimed, "I have longed these 16 years to seal the precious cause and interest of precious Christ with my blood. And now he has answered and granted my request and has left me no more ado but to come here and pour forth my last prayers, sing forth my last praise to him. Mount that ladder, and then I shall be quickly get home to my Father's house." On the scaffold, he preached a farewell sermon, urging the onlookers to prepare for the day of judgment. Man, may we die like that. The soldiers did their best to drown his voice by beating their drums. Doom, 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 doom. You know what I mean? John Nisbet sang a last psalm, and they swung him off into eternity. John Nisbet, Nesbitt, 1661 to 1727, independent minister. See, it's continuing. Was born in Northumberland. He was to leave Edinburgh in March 1680 or 1681 for being the chief contributor of burning the Pope in effigy. Yeah, these are some bad boys. These are some troublemakers. Amen. Burning the Pope in effigy in the presence of the Duke of York. What guts, man. Returned in 1689 with who? With William of Orange. Birds of a feather flock together. Another troublemaker, an Irish troublemaker. Amen. If you're an Irish troublemaker and you're a Scottish troublemaker, you'll find each other. Amen. In 1691, John Nisbet succeeded George Cockney as pastor of the Independent Church in Hare Court, Aldersgate Street. He remained there as pastor for over 30 years. He was an exceedingly popular preacher, famous for his similes. The publisher John Dunton included Nisbet with a group of Scottish ministers resident in London who had spent time in Holland. The Scotch divines, as is seen by Mr. Hamilton, Mr. Nisbet, Mr. Fleming, and Mr. Trail, now living in London, are preachers, not sermon readers. Amen. And for their affable carriage, great learning, and holy lives, they have few equals. Dunton, The Life and Errors of John Dunton, page 681. And I could show you, I've got my father's King James Bible. My father, my own father, made sure right after I was born that we went to church. Now, granted, it wasn't an old Methodist church. His father was going to an old time Methodist church, so he found a Methodist church that was close, and we went to that. You know, it was a good effort. But they were taking me to church time I was a baby. His father had a King James Bible up until the time that he died, and I have that King James Bible in my back room. He was pretty outspoken, and he was known as a strong Christian. That was his reputation. And you look through his Bible, I look through it, and he underlines places where it talks about hell and stuff like that. And then you go back to his father. I believe his name was Jellison. His father was very active in the church. I believe he played the piano and sang and that kind of stuff. And that's what you find as you go back through the Nesbitt line. You find that thing. And there's either a curse, there's either going to be a curse in the lineage of an individual throughout their genetics, throughout their children and grandchildren, great-grandchildren, or you're going to have a pattern of blessing, spiritual blessings. The Nesbits never had any money. When I did some research on the very first Nesbit, he had a castle and he didn't have enough money to finish the castle. And I thought, yep, I'm learning what I am. I'm learning why I am. The first Nesbit didn't have enough money to finish his castle. Oh, well, amen. My grandfather, Everett, the one I talked about that I have his Bible, he was always working hard his whole life, never had any money, just poor as dirt. But he had that spiritual inheritance. My own dad never had much money, always worked very hard, 60-hour plus weeks, never had a lot of money, just, got by. Myself, I'm in a rental. You see this around me? You see that paneling? You see that? This was a carport. Technically, it's still a carport, but it's now my welding shop. I don't own this home. This is a rental, but luckily this place is low enough on the totem pole, if you will, that they let me do what I want. So when I decided to build this back here, they didn't care one way or another as long as I kept paying my rent. And I've always been very good at paying my rent. I haven't had much money, but you know what? I've had spiritual blessings. And I could go on and on about how the Lord just has come along, I don't want to say magically, has come along just in an amazing way, made sure I got not only the right doctrine, but I got stuff that even I haven't heard anywhere else. I don't, I'm not, you can tell just by my talking, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but the Lord has got me plugged into something. And I will get the right answer if it's coming from this book. You ask me a question, I'll get you the right answer. I will. Why? Because I'm smart? No. Because the Lord has given me a blessing. He's given me a spiritual blessing based on, I believe, what my fathers have done for hundreds and hundreds of years. And you can do that with your children. You can do that with your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren if the Lord tarries. You can leave them a spiritual inheritance that's far more valuable than the money that you may not be able to leave them, or a nice house that you may not be able to leave them, that kind of thing. So I just want to share that with you. It's some food for thought, something for you to think about. Amen.